Now it's time to introduce my special guest this week, and I'm delighted to welcome Billy Connolly. Hello, Billy. How are you?
I'm really terrific, Barbara. How are you?
Well, I'm very well indeed, and it's a great, great pleasure to have you on Scotland on Song with us. And the theme this week is Glasgow, and you know a great deal about Glasgow, but does Glasgow still have a place in your heart? Do you still feel that you're going home when you go to Glasgow?
I definitely still do. I just got it a minute ago. Jimmy Copeland, the actor, once said to me, when I got off the train, it wasn't the plane in those days, he said, when I got off the train at Central Station and I step onto the platform, he says, I can feel Glasgow coming through the soles of my shoes and right up my legs and into my body. And I thought, what a pretentious old bugger. But you know, it's the truth.
Is it the people, or is it the look of the place, or what is it
it's
for
everything.
you?
It's the people, it's the look of the place, it's the sound of the place, it's the cheekiness of the place as well. No matter how big you get, they never take you too seriously, you know. They'll always slap you down a wee bit.
Do you find that when you come back to Glasgow, your dialect, this happens to me when I go to Fife, God help me, but when I go back, my dialect, my voice, I don't really try to talk posh, but I know that my voice does change, my dialect changes. How about you?
Mine changes absolutely instantly. As soon as somebody talks to me, I slide straight back into all the old words and expressions, and I rather enjoy doing it as well, because there's a lovely point where it's such a luxury where your brain and your mouth are moving at the same speed.
And in tandem.
Yeah, and you know, because when you get bigger and your field gets bigger and you're doing Australia, New Zealand and all that, and you don't realise that you're sort of almost censoring yourself. You're adjusting your accent to suit what you think is their understanding of it.
And the words, of course, I would think.
The words, you leave words out that perhaps you should leave in because they're lovely. I mean, people who speak Yiddish are always on about how onomatopoeic it is, but there's no drich in Yiddish. But although there should be, because it sounds Yiddish, doesn't it? Drich.
Well, it does actually. My husband talks about the weather being drich as well, and he's not Scots, but he says it's a great word because it really describes...
Yeah, well, Pamela's the same,
exactly.
but she says drich.
Drich.
Yeah. There's no equivalent for sleek it either.
Oh, no, there's lots of those, isn't it? Sleek it is fantastic.
Yeah, sleek is my favourite. Somebody
once described Border Collies to me. They said the females are better than the males because they're no so sleek it. Isn't that great? That's fantastic.
Oh, I love...
You know exactly what you mean, don't you?
I got it in one.
Billy, tell me something. If you were born elsewhere, this is a really big question. Do you think you would have had a life in comedy if you were not a Glaswegian?
Yes, I do. I think I would have had the same life as the guys I know. Some of them are dead, you know, like Tony Capstick, you know, Yorkshire guys, and Mick Elliott from Durham. You know, I think I would have found a way to be funny. But I think funny comes from your personal background, from your mother and father and the house you lived in and the school you went to, and although there's not that many old Etonian comedians, I'm sure if they wanted to be, they could, you know.
You say in your blog, which I really loved reading, which has been handed to me, which is obviously your thoughts at the time when you wrote it, that your Aunt Margaret took you to variety theatre in Glasgow. Now, of course, I had no way of going to the theatre in Dunfermline because there wasn't a similar kind of setup there. But
we were dead lucky.
Yes, you were taken to the theatre. And do you think you kind of got the bug then when you were a wee boy?
Without question, there was Jimmy Logan and Jack Mulroy and Ricky Fulton and Stanley Baxter were all charging around then. And they were being funny in my accent. Usually I would be listening to like Tommy Trinder or somebody on the radio if I was hearing anything funny. Ted Ray, all of whom were brilliant.
Yes.
But here was guys with my accent. Not only just a Scottish accent, but a Glasgow accent, using my slang, you know. There was a crowd of people. They were a religious cult called the Nameless Ones. And the leader claimed to be a reincarnation of George Bernard Shaw. It was all very strange. And there was getting a lot of coverage. And all of a sudden on comes Jimmy Logan and everybody. And they're the Hameless ones. and they were doing these sketches. And I used to just pee myself.
Well, earlier on the programme, we had the Song of the Clyde sung by Kenneth McKellar, and it said in my notes that Stanley Baxter had done a Mickey take called The Pong of the Clyde.
Oh, yeah. Do you know they sing the Song of the Clyde in schools now? My wee grandson gets it at school.
How amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Really.
I like when they double the time up and they go, there's Jean and Mary on the Govan Ferry,
yes.
on the and the siddle doodle and a deedle idle and a deedle idle deedle.
That's right, that's the last verse, isn't it? I just heard Kenneth singing it and I thought you wouldn't like to have had a few drams when you were trying to tackle that. It was quite difficult.
What a nice man he was.
Oh, he's lovely and such a lovely singer. I mean, a lot of variation
singer.
Yes, a lot of variation in the material, but I've played lots of things in these two series which have been fantastic by him.
Yeah, and it was he gave me a love of Burns more from his version of A Fond Kiss than anything I had read at school.
Do you know, I'm absolutely with you there, because my mother, who was English, used to love the singing of Kenneth McKellar and the songs of Burns, because in Liverpool she was taught Burns songs.
Yes.
And by a Scottish school teacher, and she had a love of Burns, and she used to play loads of 78s of Kenneth McKellar to me, so that's where I got it from as well.
Yeah, we had them in the house.
Yeah, fantastic.
But especially A Fond Kiss, I thought he made an exquisite job of that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, is it true that a science teacher at school came round the class asking everybody what they wanted to do?
Big Bill Sheridan, yeah.
Is this true? And he asked you what you wanted to be?
Aye, and I said I would like to be a comedian. and everybody wanted to be marine engineers, you know. Because we all lived in the Clyde and you could see all these ships with Baltimore and all that on the back and all the different flags, and everybody wanted to be marine engineers. And he said, what about you, Connolly? I said, I'd like to be a comedian. And of course everybody in the class exploded hooting and howling. And he said, well, I saw you playing football at lunchtime in the playground. I think you've achieved your ambition, Connolly.
Did you ever see him again when you became successful?
No, I never did, and I always wanted to, because right after that, for the rest of my career at school, which would have been about a year and a half, he would sneak over to me when we were supposed to be writing, doing these experiments, and he was dead interested, you know, he was genuinely interested. Why do you want to be a comedian? And blah, blah, blah. And he was very, very, very nice to me. And he had an old battered teaspoon that he used to ladle out the chemicals from the jars with. He said, he said, you leave here, you go and you make your fortunes with your careers, and nobody ever's bought me a decent spoon. And brought it back to me. And I always wanted to, and I never get round to it. I always wanted to buy him a silver spoon or something, but I never did it.
It's one of those things, isn't it? And you remember it, obviously, and if you had done it, then you would feel a lot better.
Yes, and you keep thinking, I'll do that, I'll do it. And then the word comes to you that he's dead, and you say, how's Bill Sheridan? They say, he died 2 years ago.
Yes.
And you go, I should have brought the spoon.
Life is like that, and these are all the things you learn yourself when you get older. I suppose.
Do it. Don't think too long about it.
We never do it when we're in our 20s and 30s, and there comes a time when you do it.
And apologise. Forgive people and apologise.
Absolutely right, yeah. Now, you've chosen a song, a very famous song about Glasgow, to play as an example of something that you really like. Why have you chosen this song, and what is it?
I love this song. There's two songs I love of that genre, and there's I Belong to Glasgow by Will Fife, and I'm No Awati Bida War.
That's a great song too.
I love I'm No Awati, but I used to sing it years and years ago, and when I would do Canada, I would do a kind of Ramblin' Jack Elliott version. But I love both of them, and I also love Bebob Abbotty. Do you remember doing that when you were wee?
That's a children's song, yes.
Aye.
Yes, I do.
They all three do exactly the same thing. They just hit me where I live. I don't know why, but nothing by Harry Lauder gets me. You know, I said maybe Stop Your Tickling Jocks, not bad. but there's a kind of phony showbiz thing about it. But Will Fife has a lovely, warm sort of feel to him. And Jimmy Logan used to do a lovely version of this, and he would do, the introduction he did was to I Left My Heart in San Francisco. You know, he would do that. The loneliness of Paris.
Yes.
I've been in Manhattan. Across the bay, I belong to Glasgow.
I think we should have you singing it, but let's listen to Will Fife singing I Belong to Glasgow.
Oh, great.
Anyone can see, but when I get a couple of drinks on a Saturday, Glasgow belongs to me.
Isn't that great? Will
Isn't it
Fife-
smashing? Did you feel the warmth of him?
Yes. Well, he was a great entertainer, wasn't he? And
He
I
really
think,
was.
Yeah, everybody
And
identified with him.
And he's overshadowed by Harry Lauder, who, to me, isn't half of what Will Fife is. Will Fife has lovely warmth.
I know what you mean. There's a great sort of twinkle in Will Fife. And you know, Billy, he was a CBE.
So am I.
And so are you. So you've got something else in common with Will Fife. Isn't that great? One of the most...
I want something to command. I want them to give me like an island, like Arran, and a uniform with feathers in the hat and a lot of medals.
You could have one of those fabulous tropical hats that they wear.
One of them had a
Yes.
sword and white gloves. And I can meet people off the ferry.
Well, I'll see if I can arrange that. I'll have a word to somebody. Would that be your life's ambition? Right, okay.
It would. And the last
Okay.
time I was in Australia, I got 3 rings made for my pinky, the finger next to it, and the middle finger. And they say, I belong to Glasgow.
Oh, fantastic. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Now, one of the great things about doing this show for me, one of them, there's lots, but this is a lovely thing, is that every week in the theme I get to choose a song which also kind of ties in with what we've been talking about. And this week, I've chosen a song which I love, which is from Glasgow, called Jamie Rayburn.
Oh, that's a splendid song.
And it's a great song because, I mean, just to tell you a little story about this, I used to sing this song. I'd actually forgotten that I used to sing it. This is happening to me all the time. It's not a recent thing, but I sang so many songs all those years ago and then changed direction. And then, of course...
it's
some
your
people
age, Barbara, it's your age.
People send me old cassettes of me singing songs I would swear to God I had never sung in my life. It's absolutely true. But I've started to sing Jamie Rayburn again, and I've put it on my new album because I love it. And it has the most beautiful refrain. And it's the refrain that I think is very, very strong about it. It's a good story anyway. It's very sad, of course, like a lot of songs. But it even makes my husband cry, and he's not even Scottish, he's English. But it has such a resonance, I think. So this is a lovely version, I think. This is a band called Ossian and a singer called Tony Cuff, and they're singing Jamie Rayburn. If it wasn't for your wellies by Billy Connolly from the album The Best of British Comedy Volume 2. It's great to hear you singing, Billy. We don't hear enough of you singing these days.
Oh,
Oh, you're just saying that. I can just see you going all bashful on me there.
yeah, I kind of like to sing when I'm on my own, but I tell you the trouble, I've worked with so many smashing singers that I know what a good singer is, and I know what a good singer isn't. And I'm one of the isn't brigade.
Well, okay, we'll leave it for now, and then we'll come back to that. But we were talking earlier, you went to the theatre with your auntie, you wanted to become a comedian, which caused a big laugh at school. But when you left school, what happened?
I got a job as a messenger boy for John Smith's bookshop in St Vincent Street in Glasgow, and on a message bike with a basket at the front, cycling all over the place, delivering books to people. And they had a wee scam going in the dispatch department where they would throw books into the garbage and they come down the lane and pick them up later. And I wasn't in on the scam, and I got fired because I was the lowest common denominator. So I then went to Billsland's Bread, where I met Tony Roper. He was a big shot. He was a driver. I was a van boy.
I remember Billsland's Bread.
Yes. Well, I was Bathgate and Armadale. and then my father pushed me to get a trade, so I applied to be a welder, and I got it at Stevens Shipyard in Glasgow.
I'm just thinking, if you become knighted, you can always be Bathgate and Armadale, can't you?
Lord
Connolly.
It sounds fancy, doesn't it, Bathgate and Armadale?
It has a certain ring, a je ne sais quoi.
But to me, when I hear Bathgate and Armadale, I just remember drinking tea from jam jars in the back of the bakers. The bakers would make you tea and you give you strawberry tarts.
My goodness.
And you would drink tea out of a jam jar and it was delish.
Oh, it sounds fantastic. It's amazing how some memories stick in your mind and some
Oh, that's
some
forever
don't.
with me.
When did you actually start in folk music? How did you get into that world of music?
I always loved it and I didn't know. I would watch the White Heather Club. And I would just wait for the folk bands to come on, you know. I didn't know it was called folk music. I used to call it campfire music. It was the same stuff as campers were playing up beside Loch Lomond when I was a kid. And I thought, I love that. I love that guitar stuff. And Bonnie Wee Jeannie McCall, you know, was my favourite at the time. And then a series started on television with Alex and Rory McEwen called Alex a While. And they had Pete Seeger as a guest one week. I always loved the show, everything they did. But Pete Seeger came on and played the banjo, and I thought, I've got to do that. I've got it. So I went up to the Barras and I got a banjo, an old zither banjo, and it was £6.50. And I went to George Square, to that shed where you usually find where to get the bus for Oban. And I said to the woman, where can I get banjo lessons? And she looked at me like I was from the moon, you know. And then she went away and went through some files in a shoebox. And then she came out with a piece of paper and she said, the Folk Centre, it's not far from here, it's just behind City Chambers. She said, as a matter of fact, if you go up just now, they'll be doing it on a Saturday afternoon. And I went away up, and sure enough, they were doing it. There was guys teaching banjo, and I was too embarrassed, and I left, and I went to a folk club in Clydebank, and Danny Kyle's band was playing the Tannahill folk, and Ron Duff was the banjo player, and I said to Danny, do you think he would teach me anything? And he said, ask him. And I said, would you teach me banjo? And he said, yeah, come down to my house on Wednesday night. And he taught me the first, and with 3 weeks' time I was in his band. That's
fantastic, isn't it? That's a great kind of little line. It's a thread through it all, isn't it? It's
and all the time I was led by the kind of exotica. I liked the fact that it wasn't getting airplay. I liked the fact that only a certain type of people liked it. I liked the people who liked it. They seemed more exotic than the people I knew, you know.
They were very thoughtful people. They were people who gave everything thought, didn't they?
Yeah, and you could go up to the guy, you could go up to the star, you know, if it was Josh McRae or Matt McGinn or Hamish Imlach, as soon as the show was finished, and you'd been so impressed by what they had done, and you would say, I love that, and they would go, oh, you like it? Well, do you fancy a pint?
Accessible, I know, it was so lovely that, isn't
access,
it? Yeah.
And they would tell you anything and lend you records, and
that's right.
I'd never met people like it, hairy people with earrings and all that. I thought, oh, this is for me.
And also that it was possible that you could play that music and sing it. That's what I liked about it as well.
Yeah.
You didn't need a lot of people to do it. You could do that on your own if you learned how to do it well.
Absolutely. Well, it just felt accessible.
That's right.
It felt as if it belonged to you.
When you formed the Humble Bums with Tam
Harvey,
were you surprised at your initial success, or did you kind of know you were onto something?
I kind of knew. I was having a wee bit of success myself, you know, with the banjo and the funny songs and the gadding about. But I knew it needed more. It needed more substance musically, and just needed more breadth, more muscle. And I met Tam, and he was a great plectrum banjo player, as different from a flat picker. Mm-hmm. For anybody listening who's not into folk music, flat picking is that stuff you usually hear in country music records, where the guys are playing on the heavier strings, dum 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 dum. Well, the plectrum players are usually playing jazz, but Tam had a rock and roll and jazz background, but he loved folk music, and he had discovered this way of flat picking and using his fingers as well. And I fancied it, and I said, do you fancy playing something together? And we went up to his house in Knightswood, and I played him everything I knew, and he just came smashing in on it. He was so clever.
And you played quite a lot of bluegrass music, didn't you? Because I remember you doing that.
Bluegrass and old-timey.
Yes,
and
really good, really lovely American music.
I loved the Carter family and Flat and Scruggs and people.
Yeah, and it's great music, that. I mean, I still like that music now.
And it was easy for me because since I was a boy I had liked Hank Williams, you know. And we went to the Barrows once, and you know the marketplace in Glasgow?
Yes.
And my father bought a record called Dear Mary, thinking it was a holy record. You know, he was a bit keen on Catholicism, my father. But it was a Jimmy Rogers record. I'm writing this letter, Dear Mary, to let you know how I feel. I'm lonesome and so weary I can hardly eat a meal. And I loved it. And he saw how much I loved it, and I was playing it all the time. And we went back to the Barrows, and he's told the guy, he said, about that, Dear Mary, have you anything else like that? And the guy said, there's Hank Williams on MGM, the big 78, it's a big yellow label. And he did Long Gone Lonesome Blues, and I thought I was going to fall in the street. I liked it so much. And he got it, and I learned it, and I learned to yodel. And I used to yodel for my dog.
I remember you yodeling. You used to put that in sometimes in the stuff that you played in the early days as well.
Right,
I remember that very well.
Right. Everybody I like yodels. Chick Murray was a great yodeler.
We've got to listen to your past inspiration, Billy, because you've chosen a piece of music that you absolutely love. Why have you chosen this?
This changed me in a more serious, away from the lighter Carter family stuff, is Clarence Ashley. There was a big guy called Andy in Glasgow. He had a Folkways album called Fine Times at Our House, and he played it for me one night, and there was two tunes on it by Clarence Ashley. One was called Walking Boss, and the other one was called The Cuckoo Bird. And I just fell out of my seat when I heard The Cuckoo Bird, and I said, I want to play like that. That's the kind of banjo I want to play.
Right, let's listen to Clarence Ashley.
Gonna build me.
Wow, that's Clarence Ashley with The Cuckoo there from the American Folk Music collection of Harry Smith, which was issued by Folkways Records in 1952. And it's the choice, an inspirational choice of my guest this week, who is Billy Connolly. Billy, one of the things I read in your blog, which was so fabulous and really made me laugh out loud, was you said that you're still a boy and those naughty references that you make, your humour is based on things that make everybody laugh.
That's right. I've never grown up. I've grown old, but I've never grown up. and I have no intention of growing. You'll notice it's always somebody else's idea that you grow up. You know, it's time you did some growing up, lad.
Yes.
Yeah, there's no need at all to grow up. What they really mean is it's time you get a beige cardigan and became very, very boring. If you want to know what funny is, you really don't need to go to a concert or a club. If you go to a pub around tea time or lunchtime, when you see a bunch of people from the building site next door or the hospital or the office block, maybe one of them's leaving and there'll be about 12 of them all together just having a couple of pints and saying cheerio to the person. Well, every minute or so they will burst into ecstatic laughter, and there isn't a comedian near them. People just love being funny, and they're usually slightly vulgar and a bit rude. And the British have an extraordinary history of vulgarity, which I embrace.
And, of course, laughing is fantastically good for you, isn't it?
And the louder and longer you do it, the happier you're going to be. And then it'll make you healthy and it'll cure you of diseases.
I think that's right. You also say you've never been ambitious, and I think that's really brilliant because I suspected that before I read it and you'd written it yourself.
Yeah.
You've never been ambitious. You'd always been a dreamer.
That's right.
I love that.
Yeah, but I've been surrounded by ambitious people all my life. I've had a lot of ambitious kind of agents and managers who have forced me screaming and kicking into bigger theatres and halls and stuff where I wanted to stay where I was in the wee cosy clubs. And they were right. I was glad because the platform kind of changed me and made me better. But personally, I'm not an ambitious man. I never have been, and I don't really trust ambitious people very much. They make me uncomfortable.
Billy, when you play in Scotland, do you think Glasgow is the warmest place to play, or do you think it doesn't matter?
I think it doesn't matter. Yeah. I think it doesn't matter. I've had as good nights in Aberdeen and Fife as I've had in Glasgow. I find comedy works very well where the living is hard. And it doesn't matter if that's in Alabama or Aberdeen.
That's interesting, because my mother was from Liverpool, and there's a huge kind of similarity, isn't there? In
the massive...
yeah.
Or Newcastle has
Newcastle.
a huge similarity.
And Belfast too.
Oh, Belfast is fantastic.
They're very quick over there, aren't they?
And they're extremely funny.
Yeah.
They're very... I got a T-shirt when I was there. You know how the Titanic was built in Belfast?
Yes, yeah.
And there's a wee shipyard museum in Belfast, and they have a great T-shirt. And in front it says, Titanic, built in Belfast. And on the back it says, it was okay when it left here.
Well, it certainly was as well, wasn't it? Yes, that can't be argued with. You travel all over the world. I know you have spent a lot of time in Australia and New Zealand.
Oh,
you just come back from Canada, all that stuff. How do you normally divide your time these days?
I like to fish, and my son is a mad keen fisher, and we do this saltwater fly fishing, where you can catch huge big fish. I caught a 170-pounder on the fly. But he's better than me, which makes it much more comfortable, because it stops me being daddy. You know, it takes that daddy-son thing away, because he's better than me. So we do that, and I play my banjo, and I watch the telly, and I read, and I go to work. But I must confess, I'm at my happiest when I go to work. When I've been off for 3 or 4 weeks, I start to get very itchy feet and uncomfortable to be around. I kind of need it. It's not like a drug, but it's what I do, and it's what I was born to do. And when I'm not doing it, I miss it.
What are you listening to these days?
Almost everything I listen to is country. Whether it's modern country or old country, it's a huge mixture. And occasionally people will force things on me, like Mumford and Son. And I love Travis. I listen to a bit of rock from time to time, although it tends to be older, it tends to be Led Zeppelin. I don't listen to much modern rock because it doesn't listen to me, you know, and it's not aimed at me.
But you like Gillian Welch.
Oh, I love her. And you know, I bought the first album with I'm an Orphan Girl.
Yes.
Well, I bought that because of the sleeve. I just saw these two women on the sleeve with these 1930s dresses on, and I thought, ooh, it was like in a Carter family. That whole field that I love, that 1930s Appalachia.
That's a lovely song as well, isn't it? It's a great song.
Oh, God, I love it.
But you've chosen to play something else by Gillian.
Yeah, I've got the Elvis Presley blues, and it's just... I love the take on it. I love... I just... Listen to the words. It's just that stuff about the clothes his mother wore and shaking his hips like... what is it? He's like a barmaid or something. It's just so brilliantly observed.
A different take on Elvis here.
It's great to hear a woman singing about Elvis.
Yes.
Because guys usually take Elvis as this big macho guy that they want to copy. But to hear a woman singing about Elvis from that angle, women are getting so good. And the guy who plays guitar with her is a genius.
Right, let's listen to Gillian singing Elvis Presley blues.
I was thinking that night of...
That's Elvis Presley blues there by Gillian Welch. Isn't that fantastic?
But isn't it great the way she compares him to Harlem Queens and chorus girls and stuff?
Because he was the sexiest pop star that ever lived, without doubt. And that's she's remembering, the kind of the impact he had.
I was the same in folk music, you know.
You most certainly were. I remember borrowing a very groovy, fringy jacket of yours in Inverness once at a folk festival.
The black one.
It was fantastic. It was a wee bit big, but it was very, very groovy.
Yeah, I always fancied you, you know.
Oh, Billy, the feeling is very mutual, my dear. Tell me something. Do you get a chance to play and sing today at all, or do you just do it for pleasure?
I do. And recently I've had some nice times playing with Steve Martin.
Oh, he's a great banjo player.
He lives near me in New York. And then he phoned me a few weeks ago, and the style I like is clawhammer or frailing. He said, the best guy in the world's coming up to my house. Come on over quick. And it's Mark Johnson who has invented a style called clawgrass, which is a cross between clawhammer and bluegrass. And it was lovely. He's got this beautiful Derring banjo, and he handed it to me. He said, "Do you like it?" And I said, "Oh, I love it." And Steve has one almost identical, and he gave it to him. And the guy says to me, Mark Johnson, he said, "Do you know Angeline the Baker?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Play it." And I went, dung, 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 da, dung, dung, and he joined in, and it was about another 9 players. They all joined in. I thought, oh my God.
And you died and gone to heaven.
I'm in heaven.
My brother has talked about him because my brother's in Toronto and he's a really good banjo player as well.
Yeah.
And it's the fraternity of banjo players, isn't it? That secret society.
Yes. I just took it, and it's made me mad keen on the banjo again. I've started taking it around with me. I'd stopped carrying it to gigs.
How are your dancing skills these days? Are you being called upon to waltz your wife round the kitchen?
I am not, but she keeps trying to get me to learn this Argentinian tango, which I think is awful, you know.
There could be a simple version of that could be rather lovely.
Yeah, well, I was very friendly at one point with Robert Duvall, and he's crazy about it. And he took me to a party in Los Angeles, and it reminded me of those wonderful Glasgow parties or Scottish parties where, you know, the room's full of people and then people start to dance with about 18 inches of room, you know. But there was people doing the tango with about 18 inches to spare, so... You know, they were doing all that romantic sort of posturing.
In its pure form. I do like watching...
She wants me to learn that.
Oh,
I might do it, but not to show anybody.
Oh, no. I think I would feel very inhibited about it. I would be all right dancing in my own house, you know, but not
I'm okay with the dashing white sergeant.
Well, you can fall over and it doesn't matter with the gay Gordons, does it? It just doesn't matter.
Willow.
It's fantastic fun, but some of those dances can be a bit serious. I'm going to ask you a question now, and if you don't answer the way I think you're going to answer, I wouldn't believe it. Is there ever a time that you'd stop performing?
No.
Good.
No, I will play until I die. Actually, not just because of my comedy or the kind of comedy or whatever position I'm in. I think retiral is a wee bit of an obscenity. Now, if your job bores you stiff and you'd rather go fishing, sure, go ahead and do that. But when I worked in the Clyde, they used to come round with a sheet, you know, and you'd give, you know, whatever money you had, 5 bob or 10 bob, 50p, whatever it's called now, and somebody would retire and they'd have a wee speech at lunchtime and they would give the retiring guy a wallet of notes because he was 65, which is 3 years younger than I am now. But he looked like an old man.
Yes.
And then after that, the following week he would appear at the pub. We'd have a pint at lunchtime usually, and he would appear for a couple of days, for about 4 weeks. And then for the next 4 weeks he'd come once a week. Then maybe he'd appear once every 3 weeks. And then he'd come once every 2 months.
Yes.
And then the word would filter back that he was dead.
Yes.
Because he'd lost... People forget about going to work. It's a whole other world.
It's working to live and living to work, isn't it? It's that,
absolutely,
that
but there's
thing.
a whole world of work that you
Yes.
go and you meet these other people and you laugh and you change and you become more profane and there's a whole different thing goes on.
It's absolutely right. And when people say to me, what's the highlight of your career? Because I think that's such an insolent thing to say to anybody.
I know.
What's the highlight of your career? I always mischievously say, I don't know, it hasn't happened yet.
Well, so I think that's a smashing attitude, personally.
I would wish that on you as well. It's such a pleasure to talk to you, Billy, and thank you very much for taking time to come and talk to me today.
I'm sorry I couldn't be in the same studio as you.
That's a shame, but maybe in the future.
Because I was looking forward to touching you.
Oh, well, I would love to give you a big hug as well, and maybe you could teach me the tango if we do meet.
Well, if I get the rundown on the Argentinian tango, we shall meet in Lincolnshire.
Well, we could certainly...
We'll go along that pier in Skegness.
We could certainly do Strip the Willow down there, couldn't we?
We certainly could strip the skin off you.
That would be just fantastic. Well, we're going to finish with an old song from the Humble Bums days, which is on the first collection of Merry Melodies.
Oh,
but,
my God.
Billy, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure.
Oh, the pleasure's mine, Babs. Lovely talking to you again, my darling.